Yes. Hello, Laurie. Hello,
Good
Rick.
evening, Ambassador.
Yeah. So, do you
Uh,
see and hear me okay?
yes, a privilege to have you with us tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time.
It's my privilege. I'm very
It,
glad that you are having me.
it's a
It's the end of
pleasure
a
to have
very
you.
hard day, but still, I hope that I will be of some help to you and to the listeners.
I'm certain that you will be. Lori was the one who kind of lined this up, so I think I'm going to throw it over to her to kind of kick things off and start
Thank you.
tonight.
Great. I'll just give a quick introduction here. This is Dmitry Polyanskiy. He's Russia's first deputy permanent representative to the United Nations. That's a really long job title. And rather than call you that or Your Excellency seems a bit too formal for the Maverick audience. Is it okay if I just call you
Call me,
Ambassador?
call, call me Dmitry. It's okay.
Dmitry. All right. We're on a first name
After
basis.
after 6 p.m., it's fine with me.
I just want to explain a little bit to our listeners, what that job title is and what it does. Basically, if I understand correctly, the first deputy permanent representative serves as the second most senior diplomat before the United Nations General Assembly and the UN Security Council there in New York City, where you're based. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Mm-hmm.
correct.
And you've been in that job for what, about 5 years?
Exactly 5 years in January.
Congratulations. You haven't lost your mind yet.
It's up to you to judge, not up to me.
I just wanted to start off, if you wouldn't mind. I've always been curious. Tell me a little bit about your life, where you were born, where you grew up, and how your life's journey brought you to the United Nations.
Well, I was hoping to become a diplomat all the time, but the Soviet Union, it was a very difficult task because there was a very limited number of people who had access to the foreign service. And well, I didn't have any connections, no one to pull the strings. So I was graduating from Moscow State University Orientalist department. My major was Arabic history,
Hmm.
Middle East, and I was hoping to maybe work somewhere in a news agency, to become a journalist, like my late father was, or I don't know, to become a scholar. But that was the time of perestroika, and the country was collapsing, and everybody really had different plans. As it turned out to be, some people became very rich, some people became very poor, but the diplomatic service at this moment, at this very moment, became less prestigious. One needs to say that all of a sudden the Soviet foreign service was replaced by Russian foreign service, which existed, but it was very tiny, it was very symbolic. And but these people started to run the show, and that was a very painful time. Minister Kozyrev was at this time Russian foreign minister, and he became Soviet foreign minister. So to cut a long story short, a lot of my colleagues just quit foreign ministry because the salary was very low and
Hmm.
the conditions were really very hard, and there was absolutely no clarity on country's objectives, on what do we want on international arena, what is our country, what did we inherit from Soviet Union. There were all these open questions, but I was young at this time and very optimistic, and that's why when I heard that there was a possibility to enter foreign service, I volunteered. At this moment, I worked in a international company after, immediately after graduation. It was only a couple of months, but I lost 10 times in my salary when I went to foreign ministry. So my salary at that time was $15. Can you imagine? And I
Wow.
already had a wife and a child, so to care for, and it was really hard to pursue my dream. I had to take another job, which was not forbidden, but I didn't do it in the open. So it was hard time, but step by step, I managed to stay there in the foreign ministry, and I had several postings. I started in Tunis with Arabic. Then I became specialist in European Union, and I spent almost 15 years dealing with the EU. I worked in Brussels. I also was head of section on European Union in Russian Foreign Ministry. After that, I had several assignments in Austria, in Germany, in Slovenia. Then I was deputy ambassador to Poland. And I returned and was responsible for the former Soviet countries, the CIS countries, in the department that was dealing with this. And immediately before coming to New York, I was our representative to Taiwan. We have this non-political position, which is totally the trade, culture, all these things. So I spent 2 years in Taiwan. And then my close friend and my boss, Ambassador Nebenzia, was assigned here in New York. You know that his predecessor, Vitaly Churkin, a very renowned diplomat, died here in New York. And so Vasily had to come here, and he picked me up as his number 2. And that's how I found myself here without any experience with the UN, without previous experience with the UN. So it's a very unorthodox career, because normally people in my position, which is really very important, they have deep background in UN, normally working 2 or 3 times in Brussels or Geneva, in all these UN structures. I had none, so I came here as a clean book, and I had to start everything from scratch as regards United Nations. But I had experience, of course, in multilateral diplomacy, working on EU issues. And that's it. That's how I came here.
That's
and
fascinating.
5 years already I am working here, and I can't imagine another career for myself except of being a diplomat.
So can I ask you, what is the difference in the way Russia is today compared to the way the country was under the former Soviet Union? People here in Canada, where I live, and I think in the US as well, still have a cliched idea or image of what Russia is. Can you give people a sense of what Russia is like today? Because my sense is that it's almost closer to what Canada used to be, even 10, 15 years ago. Or am I off base?
Well, in terms of ice hockey, I think maybe you're right. Maybe we would beat Canada right now, but unfortunately we don't play any matches. Canada is too condescending to organize such matches. But to answer your question, I think this is like 2 different countries. I remember the situation in the 90s. So I started in 1993. It was 2 years already in the independent Russia. And again, everything was very vague. And I frankly didn't like the foreign policy that was pursued at this time, because it was like saying yes to Americans all the time. It's not that I don't like Americans. I like Americans very much. But the problem is that we had the impression in Russia at this moment, and shortly before that in 1991, 1992, that it was our common victory in the Cold War, because we did a lot of things to ensure this victory. It's not that United States and its allies all of a sudden became stronger. There were a lot of agreements, a lot of negotiations that led to this moment. And we thought it was the moment of our common triumph, that there would not be the Warsaw Pact, but at the same time there would not be NATO. That NATO would be maybe transformed in some kind of pan-European security organization where Russia will have a say, and everybody will be built security for everyone, not at the expense of certain countries, and there will be no division lines. So we were very, romantic, like this "Wind of Change" song by Scorpions, which was performed in Moscow. I remember.
I remember that. I
Yeah,
shared
we all
that.
had very high hopes, but all of a sudden we understood that this sense of victory was stolen from us. So we had done all the necessary concessions. We believed in empty promises, but nobody was going to keep them, and now we know it for sure. And that's how we, from victors in Cold War, we became losers in Cold War. So in America, I think if you ask politicians who was the winner of the Cold War, they would say, of course, United States. But it's much more nuanced than this. That's why we started from this sense of injustice that happened to our country. And it was closely associated, of course, with the United States, because the United States was the country that was giving most of the promises that were not kept. So, of course, it formed my mindset quite a lot. I feel deeply this injustice that happened to us. There was no animosity in my country towards the West, towards the United States. We were ready to build a new world, and instead of this, we were almost colonized, and we were on the edge of breaking. We had these two wars in Chechnya, which also implied very questionable maneuvering from the West. And the assertiveness came to us only at the beginning of the year 2000, 2001, 2002. The turning point, of course, was Mr. President Putin's speech in Munich in 2007. So we absolutely made everything that we wanted very clear, absolutely, without any ambiguity. We said what were the problems. If you read Putin's Munich speech in 2007, you will see all the predictions of today's situation. We saw it all coming. We wanted to avoid it at any price, but nobody wanted to listen to us. Everybody wanted to cheat us, to trick us out, and it was not fair. It was not. I don't know. It was very mean. It really was very mean from the side of the West, and that's how we found ourselves where we are now. So to compare what feeling we had at the beginning and what do we feel now, or even maybe 1 year ago, before the special military operation started, I would say that were absolutely two different feelings among Russian diplomats, among Russian society, of high hopes with a fair world built together in harmony, this wind of change, and now up to the moment when we understand that we were and we are cheated, that we have to defend ourselves, we have to defend our future, because the policies of the West have not changed. The more I read about it, the more historic facts I learn, bring me to the conclusion that the methods are absolutely the same. The context changes, the situation changes, people change, but the methods are the same. And we still have to fight for our country, to defend our national interests. We wanted to do it peacefully. We did everything to avoid any military problems, but unfortunately, we were left no choice. I know that many people would maybe not agree with what I say, but if they knew all the details, I think they would share my opinion that we really tried to do utmost to avoid the problem that we are facing right now together, and we are on a very slippery slope altogether right now, and I think it worries a lot of people, not only in my country but in Western countries as well.
And to focus this for our viewers, I guess what we're talking about here is after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we get NATO expansion instead of an effort to bring peace. We have conflict in Syria. We have the 2014 color revolution in Ukraine that then takes us to the situation we have right now, where NATO involvement in Ukraine puts the West right on your doorstep. And that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, a lot of issues are linked to this, and I think that the problems and the Western penetration in Ukraine, anti-Russian, I would say, penetration started long before 2014. 2014 was already an apex of all these efforts, and there were previously also efforts to create problems to Russia in Ukraine, but the Ukrainian society was still not brainwashed enough to embrace all these changes. If you recall the statements of 1991 when the countries separated, I think everybody was saying that these are two brotherly nations. Nobody would separate Russia from Ukraine, and the Russian language and Russian culture will always have a privileged position in Ukraine. Everybody was saying this. Presidents were saying this, and it all gradually changed. It changed not as fast and as quick as in, for example, Baltic states, but or Poland, but still the change was there. The change was premeditated. It was really a process that started immediately after that. And as we know from some publications, United States never abandoned the dream to tear away Ukraine and other Soviet republics from Russia. Of course, we know the famous formula that Russia with Ukraine is an empire, and this was, I think, the understanding of American establishment for many years. We know about many covert CIA operations in Ukraine to boost Ukrainian nationalism. So it all started much before this. So 2014 is only the tip of the iceberg, and still a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of politicians, I know why they are doing, but I know that many people are not very knowledgeable about this. They are starting the beginning of all the problem from February 24, 2022, which was already very much the moment past all these problems, all this ticking bomb which was launched in 2014. And I try to do my best to explain the reasoning and to explain the real circumstances behind our special military operation, to explain what was the choice, if any, for us at this moment and earlier, for people to better see the nuances of this Ukrainian crisis, which will help to understand the possible way to find a solution to this crisis.